The day we looked back. July 4th, 2026. The sky above Wright-Patterson Air Force Base was the color of a television tuned to a dead channel. Dr. Elena Reyes stood at the perimeter fence with her 10-year-old son Mateo, watching the C-17s trace their slow parabolas against the Ohio summer haze. She had not wanted to bring him. But after the divorce, every weekend was a negotiation between guilt and exhaustion. And today, guilt had won. "Mom," Mateo said, not looking at the planes. He was pointing straight up, past the contrails, past the thin blue veil of the stratosphere. "What if that's why they haven't come down yet?" "What if what's why, mijo?" "What if they're waiting for us to stop being afraid of each other first?" Elena looked at her son, then back at the empty sky. She was an astrophysicist. She had spent 20 years writing papers about exoplanet atmospheres and spectral signatures of biosignature gases. She knew, with mathematical certainty, that the universe should be teeming with life. She also knew that the public record contained nothing but static, grainy videos, blurry photographs, the desperate architecture of people who needed to believe they were not alone. But she did not answer her son's question. Because somewhere in a classified server farm in Dayton, Ohio, a file was being declassified that would change everything. The first wave came on June 12th, 2026. The Pursue portal went live, and suddenly, anyone with an internet connection could download raw military sensor data. Infrared footage from F-18 Super Hornets, radar tracks from Aegis cruisers in the Pacific, audio logs from pilots whose voices cracked in ways that training could not suppress. The internet did what the internet does. It memified the orbs. It debated the tic-tacs. It platformed the grifters and ignored the physicists. Elena watched her colleagues on cable news saying the same thing over and over. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. And for a few weeks, the evidence remained stubbornly ordinary. Balloons, drones, lens flares, the taxonomy of disappointment. But then, something shifted. Not in the data, in the chain of custody. October 2026, the Dirksen Senate Office Building. A hearing room packed with cameras and the particular humidity of Washington in early autumn. Elena was not in the room. She was in her lab at Caltech, 3,000 miles away, watching the live stream on her second monitor, while her first monitor displayed a spectrograph of an exoplanet she would never publish about. Senator Miriam Chen, Democrat of Hawaii, held up a tablet. "I am showing you Exhibit 42B, a NORAD track from November 14th, 2004. This object descended from 80,000 feet to sea level in 0.78 seconds. It was tracked simultaneously by the USS Princeton's SPY-1 radar, an E-2C Hawkeye, and 2 Super Hornets. It produced no sonic boom. It produced no heat signature consistent with atmospheric friction, and when the pilots approached, it mirrored their maneuvers with zero observable lag." The general at the table shifted in his seat. "Senator, that data is currently under review." "It has been under review for 22 years, General. My question is not what it is. My question is, what have you ruled out?" The silence that followed lasted 4 seconds. 4 seconds that would be clipped and replayed and analyzed by every news network on Earth. 4 seconds in which the general's face communicated what his voice could not. There was nothing left to rule out. Mateo watched the clip on his phone during lunch at school. He texted his mother a single emoji, an alien. She texted back, "Do your homework." She did not text back what she was thinking. that the negative attribution table the Pentagon had released the previous month contained a footnote she could not stop reading. It listed 19 cases with the annotation, "Origin cannot be attributed to known human, adversarial, commercial, or natural systems." 19 cases out of 800. She knew the math. She knew what a p-value was, and she knew, with a crawling sensation at the base of her skull, that 19 was not noise. 19 was a pattern. January 2027. The Atacama Desert. The clearest skies on Earth. A consortium of universities, funded by a quiet billionaire who had made his fortune in satellite communications, had deployed a passive monitoring array across 100 square kilometers of Chilean salt flats. Radar, infrared, optical, acoustic, magnetic. They were not looking at exoplanets. They were looking at Earth's atmosphere with the same rigor that Elena's colleagues used to search for oxygen in the spectrum of a world 40 light-years away. The project was called AEGIS, All Environment Global Instrumentation System. The press called it the Skynet, which the scientists hated and the public loved. Elena was not part of AEGIS. She had been asked and she had declined. She told the selection committee that she did not want to stake her career on a project that was fundamentally chasing ghosts. What she did not tell them was that she was afraid. Not of failure, of success. On the night of January 17th, the Aegis array captured something that did not appear on any flight manifest, any satellite ephemeris, or any atmospheric model. It was a cylinder, or a disk, or neither. The data was so clean that it forced the engineers to check their calibration 3 times, then 4, then 5. The object was there. It transited the array's field of view in 2.3 seconds. It emitted no RF. It reflected no radar that matched any known material. It was, by every instrumented measure, impossible. And it was caught on 6 independent sensor platforms. Elena watched the Aegis press conference from her living room couch. Matteo was asleep upstairs. The lead investigator, a Danish astronomer named Klaus Bergström, whom Elena had met at 3 conferences and thoroughly disliked, stood at a podium and said the words that unzipped reality. "We cannot explain this object, and we cannot attribute it to any system known to human science or engineering." The questions from the press pool were predictable. Was it Russian? Chinese? A glitch? A hoax? Bergström answered each one with the same patient monotone. No, 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 no. Then a young reporter from Reuters asked the question that everyone was thinking but no one wanted to voice. "Dr. Bergström, are you saying this object is not human?" Bergström removed his glasses. He polished them on his tie. He put them back on. And then he said, very quietly, "I am saying this object is not ours." April 2027. The language changed. The New York Times stopped using UFO and started using UAP. Then it stopped using UAP and started using anomalous systems of unknown origin. Then, on April 14th, the headline read, "Pentagon acknowledges non-human source for 19 UAP incidents." The word non-human appeared in an official document for the first time. Not unidentified, not unexplained, not aerial anomalies. Non-human. A negative that carried the weight of a positive. A door that had been locked for 80 years, suddenly swinging open. The effects were immediate and chaotic. Stock markets lurched, churches filled. Conspiracy theorists declared vindication, then immediately fractured into splinter factions arguing about whether the non-human intelligence was interdimensional, extraterrestrial, or demonic. Elon Musk tweeted something incomprehensible about simulation theory and then deleted it. The Pope issued a statement about God's infinite creation. Vladimir Putin issued a statement about American disinformation. Both statements were parsed for hidden meanings that neither contained. Elena received 342 emails in 24 hours. Journalists, old colleagues, strangers who had found her Caltech faculty page and decided she had answers. She responded to none of them. She was too busy reading the Aegis data, which had been made public the same day, and discovering something that the Aegis team had missed. The object was not alone. There were 5 of them. 5 impossible cylinders or disks, or neither, appearing at regular intervals across the array's field of view. The intervals were not regular in a natural way. They were regular in a calculated way. A prime number sequence: 2, 3, 5, 7, 11. She called her ex-husband. "I need you to take Mateo this weekend." "Elena, it's Tuesday. What's going on?" "I found something. I need to work." "Found what?" She looked at her screen, at the 5 blips arranged in a prime number sequence across the Atacama desert sky. "I don't know yet," she said, "but I think someone is saying hello." November 2028. The Wyoming incident. It started with a rancher named Tom Bridger who called the county sheriff's office at 3:14 a.m. to report that a big silver thing had landed in his north pasture. The sheriff, a 4th-generation Wyoming man named Dwayne Corbett, who had seen every kind of weirdness the high plains could offer and had never once been impressed, drove out to the Bridger place expecting a crashed satellite or a weather balloon or a prank. What he found was none of those things. The object was 50 feet across. It was perfectly smooth. It reflected starlight in a way that made Sheriff Corbett's eyes hurt, because his brain kept trying to assign it a color and failing. It was sitting in the north pasture, not on the ground but about 3 inches above it, and there was a faint hum coming from somewhere that Corbett felt in his teeth. He called the state police. They called the National Guard. The National Guard called NORAD. NORAD called the White House. Within 6 hours, the north pasture of the Bridger Ranch was the most heavily secured 60 acres on planet Earth. The president addressed the nation at noon Eastern Time. The address lasted 8 minutes. It contained the word contact 14 times. It contained no definitive answers, but it contained a promise. Full transparency. Real-time information. No more secrets. Humanity had imagined this moment for centuries. In films, the aliens always landed on the White House lawn or the Great Pyramid or the Eiffel Tower. They came as conquerors or saviors or silent observers. They came with death rays or healing crystals or universal translators. But in reality, the first confirmed contact did not happen in a capital city or a cultural landmark. It happened in a cow pasture, 40 miles northeast of Cheyenne, in a state most Americans could not find on a map, because the universe apparently had a sense of humor. December 2028. Christmas Eve. Elena was in Cheyenne. She had been assigned to the Civilian Scientific Observation Team, a role she had not applied for and could not refuse. The object, which the military had designated Contact Point Alpha and everyone else called the Bridger craft, had not moved in 37 days. It had not communicated. It had not opened. It simply sat there, 3 inches above the frozen Wyoming grass, humming its tooth hum, waiting. That night, Elena video called Mateo from her temporary quarters at the F.E. Warren Air Force Base. He was with his father in Los Angeles. There was a Christmas tree in the background, and Mateo was wearing the ridiculous reindeer pajamas his grandmother had bought him, the ones with the antlers on the hood. "Did you see the pictures, Mom?" "What pictures?" "From Australia. There's another one on a beach." Elena had not seen the pictures. She pulled them up on her laptop while Mateo watched her through the screen. The second object had appeared on a remote beach in Western Australia at 400 local time, reported by a surfer who had paddled out before dawn to catch the morning swell. It was the same shape, the same impossible non-color, the same 3-inch hover, the same hum. "2," Mateo said. "That's not random, right?" "No, mijo. That is very much not random." "Do you think there'll be more?" Elena looked at her son's face, pixelated by the video compression, and she thought about prime number sequences and negative attribution tables and the 80 years of secrets that had finally collapsed under the weight of their own absurdity. "Yes," she said. "I think there will be more." "Are you scared?" She thought about the question. She had been a scientist her entire adult life. She had trained herself to separate emotion from observation, to let data replace dread. But the data was no longer theoretical. The data was sitting in a cow pasture in Wyoming, humming. "A little," she said. "Are you?" "No," Mateo said. "Remember what I told you at the air show? I think they've just been waiting." March 2029. The third object appeared in the Mediterranean, floating 10 meters above the water's surface, halfway between Sicily and the Tunisian coast. The fourth appeared in the Gobi Desert, the fifth in the Brazilian Amazon. They appeared at regular intervals. The intervals followed a prime number sequence. Elena had predicted it 3 years before anyone else noticed, and no one had believed her. And now she was the most famous astrophysicist in the world, which she hated. The objects did not attack. They did not broadcast demands. They did not land beings on the White House lawn or the Great Pyramid or the Eiffel Tower. They simply existed. They hovered. They vibrated at frequencies that made seismographs twitch, and radio telescopes record patterns that mathematicians were still trying to decode. They were the most significant discovery in human history, and they were, from the perspective of a 10-year-old in reindeer pajamas, incredibly boring. "Why don't they do something?" Mateo asked, during a call in which Elena had just spent 45 minutes explaining a new spectrographic analysis to a CNN anchor who kept asking if the aliens were friendly. "Maybe they already are doing something," Elena said. "Maybe waiting is the message." "What kind of message is just waiting?" Think about it. They didn't land on the White House lawn. They landed on a ranch in Wyoming. Not to threaten us, not to save us, just to be seen. When you're that powerful, what's the most generous thing you can do? Mateo thought about it. Let the other person decide what happens next? Elena smiled. You're going to be smarter than me someday. I already am, Mom. August 2030. the perimeter. The UN had established a 20-kilometer exclusion zone around each contact point. The zones were officially called International Observation Mandates. Everyone called them the perimeters. Within each perimeter, a small city of scientists, diplomats, military observers, and journalists had grown up. They lived in prefabricated housing units and ate at mess halls that served food from a dozen different nations. They argued about data and protocols and the proper way to prepare humanity for whatever came next. They were, in many ways, the first true international community in human history, united by something they did not understand and could not control. Elena was at the Wyoming perimeter when the Bridger craft finally opened. It was 2:07 p.m. Mountain Time. The sky was a flat, cloudless blue. The temperature was 74 degrees. 47 people witnessed the event directly. 612 watched through secured video feeds. The object did not open like a door. It did not open like anything in human experience. The surface simply ceased to be a surface. The non-color became a color that had no name, and then the color became a transparency, and then the transparency became an interior that was larger than the exterior, which violated every law of physics that Elena had ever learned, and she had learned all of them. A figure emerged. It was humanoid only in the sense that a starfish is humanoid. There was a center, and there were appendages, and that was where the comparison ended. It did not walk, it did not float. It transited the space between the interior and the exterior in a way that Elena's eyes refused to process. And then it was standing there, 3 inches above the Wyoming grass, looking at 47 human beings with something that might have been curiosity, or might have been patience, or might have been an emotion for which human language has no word. The figure did not speak, but every person at the perimeter heard the same thing. Not a voice, not a thought, something in between. Something that bypassed the ears entirely and arrived directly in the understanding. We have been waiting for you to stop being afraid of each other. You are not there yet, but you are close. We will wait longer. We can wait as long as necessary. Time is not what you think it is. And then the figure turned and went back inside its craft, which closed the way it had opened, which is to say, it did not close, it simply became a surface again, smooth and humming and impossibly patient. 2035. The morning sun over Wyoming looked the same as it always had. The grass still grew, the cattle still grazed, but nothing was the same. The contact points were still there, all 5 of them. They had become permanent features of the global landscape, like mountains or oceans, things that had always been there and always would be. Schools taught about them in history classes. Religions had adapted, some gracefully and some violently. The United Nations had passed the Contact Protocols, a document that Elena had helped draft, which established the legal framework for how humanity would interact with non-human intelligence in the future. The beings had not come to conquer. They had not come to save. They had come to be seen and to wait, and to let humanity decide what came next. It was the most profound act of restraint in the known history of the universe, and Matteo, now 19 years old, understood it better than most. He was studying exobiology at Caltech, following in his mother's footsteps while also hoping to chart his own. On a spring morning in 2035, he sat on the roof of the family observatory, the same one where he had watched the stars as a child, the same one where his mother had first shown him Saturn through a telescope when he was 6 years old. Elena climbed up and sat beside him. She was 57 now. Her hair was gray, her eyes were tired, but she was smiling. "Do you remember what you said to me at the air show?" she asked. "When you were 10? What if they're waiting for us to stop being afraid of each other first?" "Yes." Matteo looked up at the sky, which was no longer empty. The contact points had been joined by new objects the previous year, smaller ones, hundreds of them. They appeared in the skies above every major city on Earth, not as a threat, but as an invitation. They hovered for hours, then days, then weeks, and when no one attacked them, and no one panicked, and no one tried to turn them into weapons, they began descending, slowly, patiently, waiting for humanity to be ready. "You were right," Elena said. "You were 10 years old, and you understood something that took the entire human race 80 years to figure out. I had a good teacher." Elena put her arm around her son. The smaller objects were descending now. They were coming down through the atmosphere like slow snow, settling toward the cities and the fields and the beaches and the mountains, bringing with them the beginning of something that no one on Earth could fully comprehend. The day we looked back at the stars and saw them looking back at us was not a single day. It was 1,000 days. It was 1,000,000 small moments of realization. It was children asking questions that adults were afraid to answer, and those questions becoming public hearings, and those hearings becoming data, and that data becoming undeniable. It was the slow, painful, beautiful process of a species learning that it was not alone and never had been. And when the first of the smaller craft finally touched down on the lawn of the Griffith Observatory in Los Angeles, in full view of 300,000 people who had gathered to witness what no generation before them had ever seen, the being that emerged did something unexpected. It did not deliver a proclamation. It did not offer technology. It did not demand obedience. It raised one appendage toward the sky, toward the stars from which it had come, and then it lowered that appendage toward the crowd, toward the humanity that had finally grown enough to receive it. And in every mind present, the same message arrived, clear as a bell, simple as a child's question. Thank you for letting go of your fear. We have been waiting to meet you for a very long time. We are so glad you finally made it. Elena Reyes, standing in the crowd with her son beside her and tears running down her face, looked up at the stars and understood, for the first time in her life, what it meant to be home. The end.